sabrosura pa' ti que.
Hello, everyone. This is Pam, de Café con Pam, the bilingual podcast that features Latine and people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place. Welcome to episode 364 of Café con Pam. Today, we have a conversation with Steph Wharton. Steph is a leadership and visibility coach and speaker on a mission to help underrepresented folks amplify their impact beyond social media by confidently embracing their speaker identity. You get to step into a reality where you get to go deeper into your core identity, your innate strengths, your values, your mission, and leverage speaking and community to create more reach and revenue without sacrificing rest. It's a whole damn vibe. Beyond the business, you can find Steph embracing her own version of a whole damn vibe lifestyle with a big glass of vino, watching Spanish Netflix shows, and dancing bachata. Listeners, my conversation with Steph was a lot of fun because we talked about so many things. And actually, I think her and I had built some rapport prior to the show because we started doing accountability. And this just happened pretty organically, and it was really fun because we got to support each other in a way that we needed at the time, and then we got to do this interview, so we already had built some trust through this accountability journey. So if you don't have an accountability person, definitely find one. I used to have a program where we would do accountability, but then the new one kind of does, but it doesn't really. It's different. Pero bueno, sin más, aquí está mi conversación with Steph. Stephanie, welcome to Café con Pam. How are you?
I'm really good, thank you. I'm a little bit overheated. I've been running around taking care of Mateo, the little one, but now I'm ready. I'm grounded, took a deep breath, and I'm excited.
Yay, well, welcome. The question that we always ask is, what is your heritage?
I was born and raised in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and I've been living in Canada for the past just over 20 years. So I want to say it's like 2/3 of my life.
Nice. How did you land in Canada?
My parents, honestly, for anybody that has either visited Argentina or lived there, maybe still lives there, the country has been going through a lot of hard times in the last several years. And we left a couple years after one of the biggest economic downturns of the season, let's call it. And my parents were just trying to find something different. They were trying to find a country, any country, where they could give us new opportunities, where they could find a job. My dad had been unemployed for 2 years at that time, roughly. So it was just one of those, like, where can we go? Like, let's just look at a map. And both Canada and Australia actually came up because my father had like cousins, either first cousins or distant cousins in either country. So it was like, okay, let's almost like toss a dice. Where do we go? And ultimately, Canada felt like the better choice at the time for us because we didn't have to leave the overall American continent. So we're like, okay, we're not on an island. We won't be that far away. We can perhaps still have a little bit of like a closer connection to Argentina and all our family whom we're leaving behind.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have 2 younger brothers.
And everyone came together?
Yeah, the 5 of us came to Canada and we were able to connect with the cousins that my dad had. And it was really nice to at least have that little bit of connection because although we didn't know them, it was an opportunity for us to feel like we had family. We spent Christmas together. They hooked us up with a rental, with both a property and a car. So as much as it was a very intense transition, that definitely made it a little bit easier.
How was the weather? Well, it depends on what part of Argentina you're from. But Canada is cold.
It is. Honestly, I mean, I've been here, as I said, for over 20 years, and I still hate the winter. Having been born and raised in Buenos Aires, I had never experienced any weather below, I don't know, like 1, 2, 3 degrees Celsius. So to go from that to in Toronto, to go to like -20, -30 was such a shock. And I think because I'm not really like a big winter sports person, I never really had an activity or something to get me out of the house in an excited, like, let's have fun kind of way. So for me, going outside meant walking 20 minutes to school in like how would you say it? Like knee-high snow? Anyway.
Knee-high snow, I guess, yeah.
So that was not enjoyable. So I'm still that person. I now live in the opposite end of Canada, which is one of the warmest cities we have. So although we do have winter here, it's much shorter. The weather is much drier, so there's less precipitation. And the summers are much like just dry heat, nice. So I live in the mountains now, as opposed to in a city that's like full of snow 24/7.
But wait, the mountains also have snow, no?
They do. But okay, let me clarify. I live in between.
I'm like, wait. I feel like the mountains would have more snow than the city.
1000%. I live in like a valley. So basically we're right in between the Rockies mountain range and whatever the other mountain range is called. So if you drive like an hour any direction, you're like at the peaks, like there's snow in the winter, all the things. But in the valley, we're nestled right essentially where there's around, I believe it's like over 200 different vineyards in this region. So there's the vineyards, there's a beach, there's a lake. Like we still get snow in the winter, but it doesn't stay long, essentially.
I like that. Mm-hmm. I would think that is still kind of like on the colder side, but I support living in the valley where it's warmer.
We can't compare because you're hours south of me. So yeah, you would not survive here in the winters, I would presume.
I would not at all. Like I'm cold right now and it's, let's see, and in Fahrenheit, it's 59. So it's not cold. It's not warm. So in Celsius.
That's what I'm trying to figure out in my head. I feel like 70 is 20. So we probably have the same temperature right now.
Yeah. I mean, San Diego's not like the warmest thing.
Yeah.
People always think like sunny San Diego. It is sunny, but we have the Pacific Ocean. You're on the Pacific side, yeah?
I am, but it would be like an 8-hour drive. So I'm very much like, if I were to compare where I am to you, I'm like in the middle of either Washington, Oregon, or California. So like middle.
Still, the Pacific Ocean is cold. Mm-hmm. It's more cold, I think. It's colder than the Atlantic. Well, I mean, of course, it depends on where in the like hemispheres. Like, we're not going to get into weather.
But, geography and all that.
Right.
But I've heard the exact same thing where I always had this idea, this dream, this vision where I really want to do the coast, the Western coast, and like rent an RV trailer and just like road trip the entire thing and go all the way down to the southernmost point of United States. So from Canada to the very southern post. And one of the things I keep hearing, like everybody that's living in that coast, especially people in the Bay Area, so San Francisco, and they're like, no, like we don't really go in the water. Like it's very cold all the time. And I'm like, that is not, I thought it was just beaches.
Yeah, no, not in Northern California. No, there's no reason to get in that water. It's so cold. I get in the water. I don't get in the water. Even I live in San Diego. I live in a place where people vacation, which is fascinating that I don't get in. I just have a lot of respect for the ocean, frankly. But if I were to get in the water, it would be like peak summer. And even then, the water's never like warm. Like if I go to Cancun, like south of Mexico, that's where the water's warm. I get in that water. I mean, it gets there. I know people are going to be like, wait a minute. But anyway, enough with the weather. So actually, let's talk about identity, because even when I remember we met on Threads, by the way. Everyone, Threads is a great platform. And I remember when I said I interview Latina people of the global majority who break barriers, change lives, and make the world a better place, blah, blah, blah. When you talked about you were very specific about saying, I'm not a person of color, but I am Latina. Tell me more about that.
Oh, yeah. That is honestly I'll be completely transparent. It's something that I have struggled with. I think I still struggle with it because I lived in Argentina for 13 years. So it was the majority of my growing up, like childhood. So to be surrounded by people that I would closely identify with, right? We were all Hispanic, we're all Latinos. Although in Argentina, we don't typically use the term Latino, we use the term somos argentinos, but that's a completely other tangent. And so I was born and raised around people that shared my culture. And everywhere you went, it felt like you belonged. Then to move to Canada, it was this completely different space that I was entering, where although it's a very multicultural country, the city that I was living in, there was no other Latinos. So I was surrounded by a lot of diversity, by a lot of folks that I had never been exposed to, in different cultures that I had never been exposed to, which was really freaking cool. But there was no one that either looked, sounded, or shared the cultura that I had experienced growing up. And being in North America now, I kept being slowly exposed to the concept of being Latino, which literally is anybody from Latin America. You're just Latino by default. But the biggest stereotype of being Latina was this very curvy, dark hair, dark skin, dark features, with an accent, certain clothing. And the stereotype was just so strong. It was just everybody's understanding of who was Latina was very physical, it's very visible, right? The representation. So whenever I would tell people where I was from, they're like, oh, but you're not Latina. Like, where are you actually from?
Wow.
And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I'm literally as fresh off the boat as it could possibly get. Like, I literally just landed. Like, my accent, sure, was very subtle because I had learned English growing up. But other than that, like, I had been born and raised, like, yes, there were some people that were darker skinned, but a lot of the folks in Argentina, there's a lot of influence and immigration. Like, there's a lot of the background is a mix of like Italian, German, Spanish from Spain. So there's a lot of like a mixed bag of people in terms of like the looks. So to now have entered a place where people were like, no, but like you're Canadian, like what? Like your grandparents maybe from somewhere. It's like, no.
Wow.
Yeah, there was a big disconnect in my external, I guess, world and the way that people were being perceiving me, and then what I felt and why I identified inside. And it feels like the more I connect, even in the entrepreneurship world, the more I connect with other Latinas, the majority of the Latinas I connect with are women of color. So it's this not stereotype, it's this expectation or this thing that keeps being perpetuated where I almost just internally, nobody's saying this, nobody's saying I don't belong, but internally it feels like I don't belong because I don't fit the stereotype. And with every person I connect with, it's this reminder of just that experience that I had when I first moved here, that it's like, oh, well, you're not Latina enough, you're not Hispanic enough because you don't look the part.
And maybe even your last name, no?
Yeah. My last name doesn't help either. My grandfather was English, so I inherited the name that way. My father was also born in England, but only because the family was traveling there. My father actually was also raised all throughout Latin America. His siblings are all from all over the place, from like Chile, from Peru, from Ecuador, and he's the one that lived a lot of his younger years in Argentina. So it's one of those things where like they lived everywhere, but still very Hispanic, still very with the same culture, but like you just mentioned, with an English sounding last name.
And that just, I think, like confuses things even more, right? Because if you were Steph Lopez, then it would be easier for people to understand and be like, oh, like you're a white Latina, like that's a thing. But then, you bring in the last name. And so it could, just from a like normal human perspective, I think people could question it a little more because of your point of the stereotype. There's almost like there are no pieces for you to fit in them unless we hear you speak Spanish or, which all of those things don't translate in a picture or in like seeing your name somewhere.
Exactly. I would say It's definitely one of the things that people are used to, almost like connecting the dots, right? You meet somebody, you see what they look like, you hear their name, all these different things, and you start connecting the dots. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, especially in this day and age, I feel like, and maybe this is something that I can rewire myself to shed this, this old, like childhood experience where that feeling of not belonging and like I don't look a certain way, et cetera, et cetera. But for everybody else too, like, you know how we learn to rewire the way that we welcome people, the way that we perceive people, even with our pronouns, even with gender, even with anything, honestly, that I feel that where folks are from, their background, their heritage, that gets to be one of those things as well, where we can no longer make assumptions around where people are from and what that even means about them as a person. I think just that gets to be another area of growth that we all get to experience.
100%. And so I'll share something that I experienced. So I actually had a podcast guest pitch themselves once. This episode never came out. And everything in the pitch was like, she's a Latina founder. She's won Latina awards. Like she built this company from zero to like whatever. And literally like it was a product-based business, and she won a ton of like Latina-owned business awards. So then when I did the interview, I was like, well, what's your heritage? And she said, I'm Spanish, literal de España. And so I was like, and she looked white, which I've learned not to, because I grew up in Mexico City. There's a lot of white looking like Mexicans in my case. And so like the way that people look, it's not something that I like question, you know? But that's why I asked the question of heritage. And so when she said I'm from Spain, it like sunk me a little bit, because if we're going to get technical, she's not Latina. Do you agree?
Yes. Yeah, she's Hispanic.
Correct. And so I was like, oh, wait a minute. So you've never lived in Latin America. You have zero ties to Latin America. You have experienced the privilege of being European. And you're taking up space in all of these awards, which you like, she did have a rad product. Like, frankly, they sent me some samples and I still use it. And I'm like, what gave you, like, in your mind? Like, I literally asked this, and I'm sad that this interview didn't come out because we had technical difficulties, which I'm like, saved by the bell. But I did ask her, what gave you permission to believe that as someone that comes from a place of privilege, because she does, you could take the spot and win the award for Latina-owned businesses when Latinas are the most underpaid, under-resourced, et cetera, et cetera. What comes up for you with that?
What comes up for me, honestly, is that there needs to be more awareness, because I know, and this is all folks, like my experience with what I'm about to share is all folks that they don't identify as Hispanic or Latino themselves. So I understand that to a certain extent why there's such lack of understanding. But I've had to explain the difference between being Latino and being Hispanic. And it's one of those things where even after you explain it, in some instances, it's like, folks don't quite understand. It's like, oh, but does that even matter? Like, shouldn't they be interchangeable? It's like, no, there's differences. And even for myself, as somebody who is half white presenting, all the things, there's so many instances, even Café con Pan being one of those instances where I was like, well, but should I not put my name forward? Because it's a lot of the Latino community are women of color. And I know that that's another layer, right? Like, I've got my own privilege as being white presenting. So it's one of those things, like, I understand that gray area between fitting in one scope, one identity, one group, one minority, and then also not fitting in and not belonging to that space. So I feel like in that gray area, it's almost our inner duty, if you will, to better understand where we belong, where we don't belong, where we get to take up more space, where we don't get to take up more space. So yeah, even within the community and outside the community, I feel like we need to talk about it more. We need to, not from a place of like, hey, you don't belong, but from a place of just explaining what that means to a lot of the folks that are part of the Hispanic community versus the Latino community.
Yeah, I agree. She didn't like my question. So after we finished, I mean, because I could like, it rubbed me some kind of way. And because I know other small businesses that are product-based businesses that I thought about when and these are like from the Latino Association of whatever, like these are organizations that gave this woman awards, Latina own award, whatever. But I was very confused. And, sometimes my autism comes out. And so she didn't like my questions. And at the end of the interview, for some reason, the audio was corrupted.
Oh.
She never responded again to do a second interview, which is fine. But it's still it's one of those things that I'm like, how dare you? It just felt really, I don't know. It triggered me in some way, which, I mean, not bad, but I was in a way that I was asking questions anyway. But thank you. Yes, I think awareness is something that's important for everyone, even for people of color. Like for me, for example, I have the awareness that I cannot claim an Indigenous identity. And people have questioned it before. I have friends who have said, well, why don't you claim indigeneity? And I see it. I see other people that look like me that claim their indigenous side. And personally, I'm speaking for myself, I have so much respect for people that actually experience the indigenous experience, because I grew up in Mexico City, where I see the erasure of indigenous people. I have seen it here in the US, and I have skin tone privilege that I don't present that way. And so I have so much reverence to and respect and awareness to not claim something that doesn't belong to me. Make sense? But so yeah, it's deep.
Yeah, it really is. There's in Latin America, there's so many layers to it. When you bring the indigenous piece too, Spanish is not the native language, the native tongue. It adds so many layers of okay, well, what does it actually mean to be then Latino too? What does it mean to be from Latin America? Is it the folks who colonized and the descendants of, or is it the folks who lived there in the land before all that, right? There's just so many layers, so much nuance. So I think that's probably where, at least part of where some of the triggers, not necessarily your own, but in general for people can come when folks do embrace certain labels and identities that aren't their own. It's well, no, but you don't have this experience and you're not. So it's very hard when folks, especially when it comes to labels and identities that are of minority, it becomes really hard to see folks who that are not part of that to embrace those identities, where it's no. You do not, like you said earlier, you do not have that experience. You do not have a full understanding of what it is truly like to be XYZ. And even if you do, it's secondhand, it's third hand. It's not that firsthand experience that's so different. So no, I get it. I get the overall sentiment. It's hard when there's so much depth to it.
So much. And then, we can go to the other side and be well, someone's truth is their truth and we can't question it.
Right. Oh, so much nuance.
So that's why we have conversations about identity here, because I don't know if there's a right way to, especially as immigrants. And immigrants, this comes from descendants of immigrant, thinking about places that host people from other places like Canada and the US, if we go to Latin America, it's a different experience because it's more about class and color, but not necessarily race. In the US and maybe Canada, I don't have the Canadian experience. That's where it gets a little bit more complicated because of the various things.
It really does. I think even what you said earlier about like everybody's experience is their own. One of the things that I experience here in Canada, and it's not my own experience, but what I witness is folks' ability or desired connection to their background and their heritage generations and generations and generations after the fact. And I just find it so interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, if you still identify with that culture, with where your great, great, great grandparent came from, hey, that's your own experience. But I just find it so interesting because I'm like, that is very far removed. But I guess it also depends on the family, right? Like some families are very adamant on passing on those experiences, their cultura, like everything, whereas others don't. And it could be a personal choice. It could be a matter of safety and belonging. The reasons are always different. But at the end of the day, some families do pass that on and some don't. So when that culture, that experience is passed on generation after generation after generation, it's a lot easier to say, hey, I am Italian, even though you've been living in Canada for 4 years or for 4 generations.
Totally. Like it's just not something that I think has a solution. It's a conversation. It's an ongoing conversation, and
it is.
It's just very layered. But back to your story. So tell me about, we have 30 minutes left. This is wild. How did we make this happen? So tell me about the time when you said, I'm going to quit my job and start my own business.
Oh, yes. Honestly, it felt to a certain extent like a very immediate, like out of the blue kind of decision. But I think below the surface, the decision to like quit corporate was building up for several years. I was so burnt out in corporate. I was...
what did you do?
I was in insurance. Very different from the coaching world and what I do now. But yeah, I did insurance for 7 years or 6.5. And the last couple of years, I was covering somebody's mat leave for a couple of the accounts. I was doing more work than one person could handle. And we were all, I think as a team, we were all taking on a lot more work than we could handle because of how the market was. But I got to this place where for several years, I was just unhappy. I wasn't fulfilled. I was burnt out. I was starting to experience a lot of anxiety and even like weekly panic attacks. And it got to be too much. And on the other hand, what I started to do is started to find outlets. So I started taking online courses, originally just for fun, just to do something different in the evenings. So I wasn't just working my 9 to 5, 24/7, sleeping and then going back. And ultimately, we ended up getting married, my partner and I. We went to Maui. We were basically living like the island life for like 2 weeks. We rented a property. We were doing groceries, having beers and sandwiches at lunch, and just living such a chill, not extravagant life. And I was like, wait, why are we hustling in like corporate, I was going to say corporate America, corporate Canada, when this is the life? Like I want more of this. I want the slow moments. I want like fun activities. I want to just like wake up without an alarm clock, all these things. And we got back from the honeymoon and my wife goes, so do we want to move? And I'm like, what? What? Like, are you serious? And at this time, I had a bit of a business already. I had taken these courses and turned it into like a profitable-ish business. And I was like, oh, okay. And we ended up quitting. We quit on like we decided on a Saturday, we quit on a Monday, and 30 days later, we packed all our stuff and did a road trip across the country and never looked back.
Both of you quit?
Both of us quit. I like to say I retired my partner from their six-figure job, even though that probably wasn't exactly the order of events. But no, we both quit. I had been in the industry for 7 years. She had been in the industry for 9, almost 10 years. And we just dropped everything just with my part-time business. And we're like, let's make it work. And if in 6 months it all goes to heck and like it doesn't go anywhere and we're broke, we'll come back. But it didn't happen. The business ended up growing. And eventually, like 2 years or so later, she ended up finding a job. And we made it work. And here we are.
How do you believe? Because I feel like we're so conditioned to what life, quote, is supposed to look like, quote. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think on one end, you had the evidence of your trip. So that gave you evidence to see the possibility. Mm-hmm. But on the other end, it's this element of how are we going to survive? Because living in capitalism, it just requires resources that, like, because of the conditioning that we have, we've been trained to work for it. And so how did you give yourself permission to let of that go? Or was that not even in the radar?
I think this is actually a really good conversation because I think transparency is so important. There's so many people sharing only bits and pieces of their story, and not on purpose, just because that's what they've shared to date. And it gives this almost expectations like, oh, you can just quit. You can just start now and like put everything on a credit card. And it's like, right. We're not all doing that, right? Like that's one experience, that's one possibility. But for a lot of people, that just doesn't jive with their nervous system. And you need a lot more either planning or security or whatnot. And I mean, for us, it was a mix of, I had saved some money. So we knew that we could be comfortable if the business wasn't making any money for 6 months. That was like our threshold, like what a nervous system could handle. And then after that, any further financial, let's say, difficulties would just not be tolerated. So we kind of had that plan. Of course, we had family back home that we were leaving behind that we knew would welcome us with open arms if we needed to come back and sort our life out, find a rental, whatever. So in those instances, like in those aspects, we had the quote unquote internal security that we could make ends meet for a certain amount of time. We were also moving to a town that, although we'd never even been to before, never even heard of before, to be honest, was more affordable. So we had secured a rental that was like half the price what we were paying in the big city. Wow. So there was all these little things that were kind of like aligning in that sense. But I think internally, what really helped us just like make that decision, I think, at least for me, I won't speak for my wife, was the fact that I'm very heated. I'm very passionate when there's something that I either want, believe in, etc. And what I was experiencing in that moment, it was almost like I just wanted to swear up and down the entire system, like what you described as like that. All you need in order to succeed, you need to like go find a corporate job. You need to like save for retirement, buy the house, do all like check all these things. And I'm like, what if, I mean, God forbid, what if we don't make it to retirement? Like it could be health related. It could be financially. We may not be able to afford, right? Like I've seen my parents move to a new country. They had to leave all of their savings behind. So they had to start their retirement funds from scratch at the age of, 40? So I'm like, that you may not be able to retire. Like they're still working in their 60s. So it just the entire concept that you have to, although nobody really says this outright, I hope not, people don't say this, but it's a concept that like you have to wait until retirement so you can finally travel and do the things that you love. Yeah. And that just like, it boils my blood. I'm like, there's no way I'm waiting till then. So I think that was kind of like my heated, passionate side of me that I was just like, nope. We're done with all this. We're going to start something like a different lifestyle where, yes, we may have to work. We might have to like do all the things to make ends meet, but we're going to do it on our terms, right? Like, let's lower our bills. Let's get rid of this entire lifestyle too, where like every time you go out and socialize, it always has to be like spending so much money on like brunch and $30 mimosas and all this. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, no. Let's slow down. Like this isn't, although it makes us happy and it's fun, it doesn't actually bring us joy. It doesn't fulfill us. So let's go find that elsewhere. And I think that's that inner passion, honestly, at the end of the day, is what got us to just quit and make that what felt like an abrupt decision.
Nice. Okay, this is a great time to take a quick coffee break. So, Stephanie, do you drink coffee?
I do not, which is hilarious because in the entrepreneurship world, we all meet for coffee chats, and I'm here with my lemon water. This is what I'm drinking right now.
You've never had coffee. Well, do you drink mate as an Argentinian?
I wish. So I have an entire bag of mate in my cupboard. No, tampoco. And I got my wife into mate, but I don't drink hot drinks. I don't drink teas. I don't drink coffees. The closest thing I'll drink if we go to like a Starbucks is like a vanilla frap, which is basically like vanilla ice cream.
And it's cold.
Yeah.
Why not hot?
I think I don't like the flavors. This is going to sound awful and everybody's going to hate me that listens to this. But to me, like tea tastes like dirty water. And coffee, I just can't get behind the taste. I even saw a reel yesterday that said it was this Australian dude talking to himself, and he kept being like, bro, like drink some coffee. And he's like, why? It tastes bad. He's like, oh, add some milk, but it still tastes bad. Add some sugar. It still tastes bad. And then all of a sudden he's converted into a coffee drinker, and I could not relate more. I was like, yep.
That's funny. Well, so what's your beverage of choice? Do you have like a morning ritual where you drink something?
I always, honestly, lemon water throughout the entire day. It's the first thing I pour. And I'm trying to think if I ever want anything with more flavor, it's usually just with like a dinner. So I'll either grab like a glass of vino or a beer or even just pop if I'm really looking for that flavor and like that sweetness. But otherwise, lemon water 24/7.
I like that. And your teeth they don't get sensitive with the lemon?
That's hilarious. When I got pregnant, somebody asked me, was it my doctor? I can't remember. But they said, oh, you can't drink coffee or at least not as much. So what are you going to do? And I'm like, oh, I just drink lemon water. And they're like, oh, that's perfect. But don't tell your dentist. And I was like, what? Like, why is this a thing?
My dentist told me not to drink lemon water because the acidity of the lemon, según, I don't know, it like kills your enamel.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But, don't listen to me. I don't want to place beliefs in your head.
No, I've heard that's a thing too, where you're supposed to like brush your teeth at least 20 to 30 minutes after eating, because otherwise it strips away your enamel and it doesn't like regenerate. So you might be onto something / your dentist or whoever might be onto something there.
Well, I drink coffee.
Yeah. What's your drink of choice?
And my drink of choice is coffee. My body has kind of like rejected coffee first thing. So I have started to drink water first. And because also, I don't want to like start my day with caffeine, which I've done for many years. And so now I'm switching to drinking water first thing in the morning. And I do salt water for like with the electrolytes and all that thing to like hydrate my body. And then I move into coffee. And so I have a thing I do like hot drinks. I am on the opposite end. If I could drink everything hot, I would. Like I am that person.
I'm going to have to Google this whole like salt water thing, because you just said like, oh, it like rehydrates you or something, but doesn't salt dehydrate you?
Well, it's like specific salt water.
Okay. Interesting.
So, I mean, you could do like a low pinch of salt. It's the whole thing with like the minerals and I have a thing with liquids that enter my body. So I have like a whole, ¿cómo se llama? It's alkaline water machine, and I drink, like I put salts in my water. It's like specific hydration salts.
Yes. Okay. One of my friends has that like alkaline water, and we went drinking for like New Year's to her house, and she was like, oh, in between your drinks, go do this setting or whatever. And I was like, really? I'm like, okay.
No, it's like I have a thing for liquids in my body. And so right now, today, I am drinking my regular schmegular mushroom coffee. I'm on my second cup cup for the day. And like, I only have one. After coffee, I switch to tea, and I'm going back to my roots. People that have listened to me for a while, they know that before I drank coffee, I drank tea. And so I say I'm going back because I have been getting very much again into loose leaf tea. And I'm not a French press drinker. I just don't like French press coffee. It's a whole thing. We're not going to get into it. But I use my French press to press my tea. I mean, not to press my tea, but like to brew my tea.
Oh, yeah.
So midday, you'll see me making my concoctions. And yeah, it's been fun. So I moved to a new house. I have a hut now, and I can display all my herbs and make like mixed teas. Super fun.
Is this like an outdoor hut, like almost like a greenery kind of space?
No, it's like a kitchen hut, like a wooden, like un mueble that looks like
okay. Okay. Yes. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, like an old hut. Because before, and I bring up the hut because before it was like all in the cabinet, so I couldn't see what was in it. But now it's all displayed, and there's like, my witch's hut is like very witchery.
I feel like that's perfect because I have a lot of things like at home, whether it's like snacks or just even like knickknacks or like kitchen utensils, like kitchen things, and it's all hidden. And I find like I just forget those things exist. Exactly. And especially if it's food, it just it goes expired, it goes bad. It's a very much like that whole ADHD, like out of sight, out of mind thing. I'm like that with people. I'm like that with food. I'm like it with anything. That fridge, if it's not at the front of the fridge, it's getting forgotten. So the fact that you get to display your teas, I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. Like that gets you into the whole like ritual routine of actually enjoying something that you love way more often than you otherwise would.
Indeed. Talking about that slow life. You can sprinkle slow life throughout your day, I think.
You really can. You really can in like the tiniest little ways. And it's actually so healing to be able to just realize that, as opposed to we're so trained and conditioned to go through life in like almost like auto mode, where it's just, okay, you wake up, you go to work, you do this, and it's just go. And it's very much like a hustle mentality. And it's to a certain extent, it can be what you need to survive, right? But it's just, no, let's find little pockets. Even if 1 minute, 5 minute pocket is all you have, then just start there to just bring a little bit more slowness, more joy into your life, to just be more intentional with your experience of your day to day.
I agree. Well, on that note, let's get back to the show and your story. So, Steph, you quit your job and then you have this part-time business. How do we get into speaking?
Yes. A lot of pivoting, honestly, because I didn't even start in the coaching world. Like I started in the design world. So it took me not a long time, but what felt like a long time to find my deepest passion, if you will. But what actually got me into speaking was a whole fluke. I was trying to build my business, and this was before we quit. And I was just on social media all the time, trying to promote my services, trying to get my first couple of clients. And I guess to me, the marketing side came a lot more naturally. Like I went to business school, so maybe I had a lot more, even though I didn't consciously realize it, I had a lot more background and experience with how I get to show up, how I get to sell, that somebody noticed and they're like, I love what you're doing on Instagram. Like, I love the way that you show up and market yourself. And like, this is so freaking awesome. So they invited me to speak in person on a panel in Toronto. And I was terrified. I was like, wait, what do you mean? Like, yes, I have a business. I've got paying clients, but this is like a part-time thing. Like, I'm not like making it big yet. Whatever that means anyway. Right.
Right.
So I did that event, and I mean, as much as I was like terrified and was getting all like, not an upset stomach, but like butterflies / like nerves and anxiety, once the panel started and the questions started rolling out, which I was experiencing even more anxiety around, because I was like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I don't even know the answer to the questions? But it turned out it was more about my experience. And I'm like, this is kind of cool. I get to just share, like, there's no wrong way to share my experience. Like, it's just my beliefs, my opinions, like what's working for me. Nobody's expecting me to be this all-time expert that has the answers to everything and they have to be the right answers. It's like, no. They get to be the right answers for me, my experience. So to be able to have, no pun intended, experience that, it was kind of like refreshing, because I was just there hanging out. It's kind of like you and I are hanging out right now. We're just chit-chatting. We're asking like curious questions and just allowing the conversation to flow. And that's what that speaking event did for me. I was just like, okay, I get to show up in front of people who are curious about my expertise or my thoughts and opinions on X subject matter. And I get to do it in a way where I'm not up here trying to market myself. I'm just sharing because it's a conversation. And after the fact, I had people coming up to me and I'm like, I'm nobody special here. Like, I don't have a huge following. I'm not like a top famous like celebrity name in the online space, but they still had follow-up questions. I had people asking to interview me on their podcast. And I'm like, wait a minute. Like, there's something here, like speaking, being able to connect with people in this like very like genuine way.
Yes.
I can build something out of this, right? Like, I can make speaking the way that I take up space. I don't have to market the traditional way. I get to almost just market and serve through speaking. And that was the most kind of like groundbreaking aha moment that I had in my business. And I'm like, okay, going forward, let's play around with this. Let's experiment and see if I can replicate this. And that's where it kind of all snowballed from.
I love that. Did you ever experience, because in the beginning we talked about identity and we talked about feeling like not belonging, because especially the speaking, like now I've been speaking informally for a while. I did Toastmasters for a minute, like the whole thing. And the speaking world, I mean, just like anything, frankly, there's also, you have the thought leaders, I guess. So to bring it back to that identity that we talked in the beginning, how did you ever experience like not belonging in the speaking world? And if so, how did you overcome it?
I think I don't even think I can say that I've overcome it per se, because I feel like the more speaking engagements I do, whether it's like in person, virtual, whether it's an event or a platform like a podcast, or even privately, if I do like group coaching or group trainings inside of masterminds and kind of like group programs, I feel like the more that I do them, the more pressure I just naturally put on myself, right? To be bigger, be better. So no, I think even it's the complete opposite. The more I do this, the more of an imposter I end up feeling. And I just kind of roll with it. Like I see it very black and white as what it is. It's just growth, and it can be scary, right? But to help illustrate now that I'm embracing speaking as something that I do, not just within my business, but something that I coach my clients on, whether it's through doing visibility tours, embracing speaking and adding it to your business model so you can like assign clients through speaking, like whatever it might be. It puts even more pressure, and it's self-imposed, but more pressure to book even bigger speaking engagements myself, because I'm like, well, how can I coach on this? How can I teach this if I'm not embodying it and walking the walk myself, right? But it's just a constant reminder that I'm like, even if I'm not the biggest speaker in the world, I've got, again, it boils down to my experience, my perspective, my angle, my knowledge that I get to share with other people. And it's more about what my clients or my community want out of speaking themselves. I don't have to speak on a TEDx stage in order to help somebody overcome their resistance, block challenges that they have around speaking, right? I get to help them and come to their own realizations, essentially, and help them figure out creative ways to embed it into their business so that they can use it as a way to amplify their reach, to get in front of new people, to sign new clients, and make it essentially like a funnel almost. And that doesn't require me to be bigger, but that does not change the fact that it still feels hard. It still feels like it's this self-imposed pressure that I have to do more, that I have to be more of a speaker, right? But I feel like that's a very natural human experience, to just always feel like you're not enough almost.
I know. It's very real. When it comes to your business currently, how do you manage, like, percentage wise? Like, how much do you speak and market yourself as a speaker, and how much do you market yourself as a coach for speakers? And is that something that has shifted? And how did you decide what percentage was going to go for what?
That's actually a really good question, because it definitely did shift recently. So for those of you that don't know, I knew you, Pam, I went on mat leave for 3 months recently. So over the winter, I had just had my baby. I was getting used to that. And I was like, okay, we're going to put the business on pause. However, from like a visibility standpoint, I was still having a couple of speaking engagements being released. I had my podcast, had my email, my free community, like everything was still kind of like running on autopilot, but I just wasn't showing up. I wasn't doing any client work, none of that. And when I came back, I realized, I'm like, okay, my capacity is very, very, very different than what it used to be. Like before mat leave, I used to have all the time in the world to show up on social media, to do these big, like extravagant launches, and to basically just pour every ounce of myself into the business. And now I do not have that capacity at all. Like I work 2 days a week, and yes, it's because I chose to do that, but it's also because I don't have capacity to do more than that. And I've structured my business. I've had to make that shift where speaking is actually becoming a larger percentage of what I focus on inside of my business, because it allows me to serve through free content, to share my perspective, my ideas, my concepts with people without me having to be on 24/7. So speaking engagements are 100% something that I'm pouring more energy and time into. Whereas my business, like the kind of marketing that I do through social media and everything else, where it requires me to show up in the moment, that varies. So the way that I've structured it right now, and we'll see if it changes, is almost like every other month. So I'll do 1 month where I'm actively publicly launching something on social media. We're doing the whole thing. Then we close off that launch. And then the next month I focus on, okay, instead of my offers, let's push speaking. Let me book more speaking engagements so that for the next 3 to 6 months, I have speaking opportunities, essentially sharing my thoughts and opinions on autopilot without me having to do anything. So that's almost, I would say, roughly every other month. That's how I'm playing around with it right now.
I can't believe we're out of time, but I'm sure a lot of these conversations will take them offline and keep talking. But tell us all the places and spaces where we can find you.
Absolutely. So, I mean, speaking engagements, which I can't direct you to, right? Like all the podcasts, all the things, but no, all jokes aside, I would say connect with me on Instagram. If you found anything that I shared interesting, Steph Wharton _ is where I'm at, even if it doesn't look like what it used to before mat leave. And otherwise, I have the Whole Damn Vibe podcast, which releases episodes every week, almost like twice a week, I want to say right now, which is, I'm pretty impressed with myself.
I know. I'm impressed with you.
Thank you.
I can barely do one a week.
Right? It's a lot more work for you because you're doing interviews right now, right? I went through a season where I was doing interviews and it was so much more work that I've had to like put a cap on that. And now I only do them as like mini, almost like events or seasons or whatever. And it's like 1 a year tops, which I'm not even sure I'm going to do this year. So it's a lot simpler when you do solo episodes, I will say.
It is. It is. I've been doing 1 solo episode a month because people also seem to like them. So
I think solo episodes are awesome.
Yeah. They're fun. And yes, they are much easier because then I can just sit down and record whenever. I agree.
Yeah, and I'm sure your community wants to hear more from you too. So this could be an invitation to do more of that and share your thoughts with your frameworks and your ideas.
Yes, working on it. Thank you for the call out.
Love it. Now more people can start asking for it too.
Right. Yes. Okay, so you tell us where we can find you. Last few questions. Well, before we go to the end, last questions. What's coming up for you? What are you working on? What's cooking? Even if you can't tell us about it yet.
That's hilarious. Even if I can only passively tell secretly things about it. Let me think. Right now, I'm in this season where I've actually revamped my entire product suite. So what I'm working on, which I've given you kind of know about this already, actually. I'm in this new season where there's this one program I'm not launching, and then the other two programs I am. And it's such a weird dynamic compared to what I'm used to. But I'm kind of loving it because it's almost like a step-by-step journey. It's 3 programs that build upon each other. It's all speaking related. And right now, the 2 that I'm focusing on is first the Visibility Tour Challenge, which is just challenging you for 30 days to put yourself out there to book speaking engagements through social media. It's been a lot of fun. We've done 2 renditions already. I'm gearing up to do another one probably this summer. And as I'm alternating between that challenge, the other one I'm working on is the speaker identity. Essentially, it's like a little mini mind, and it's all around figuring out how to elevate your speaker portfolio and how to create a visibility strategy that allows you to use speaking in order to create more demand and attract clients seemingly out of the blue. So those are the 2 that I'm playing around with for the entire year. I'm going to be launching them on rotation, and I'm having a lot of fun with it because this is the first time that I'm really going all in on myself, embracing the fact that speaking is what I help my clients with the most. So I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yay. I'm excited for that. If you do it in the summer, I'll join the summer one, which I feel like we are in summer.
That's hilarious. We'll welcome you with open arms.
Yes. Last few questions. What's your remedio?
Oh, okay. So this, I can't say it's my own. I can't own it. I heard about it somewhere on social media. And the reason why I almost love it is because I tried it in real life and it worked, or at least it worked indirectly. So the little remedio, it's if you ever get mosquito bites. So I have a weird blood type, I guess, or whatever it is that repels mosquitoes, because I'll get a couple bites, but nothing excessive. And I was in Miami, how long ago was this? 8 years, almost 9 years ago. And I was in Miami for a bachelorette party, and I met this one girl, and she was getting mosquito bites everywhere. And I'm like, hold on. I heard this little remedy, and the thing is, you rub salt on the mosquito bite, and it will immediately go away. You won't be itching it. It'll be perfect, right? And she was so hesitant. She's like, okay. But we had a couple of drinks. She's like, okay, let's try it. So she just extended her leg out, and I'm like, oh, I guess I'm doing this. I'm like, okay, sure. Let's roll with it. I'll rub the salt on your knee. So I went and I did the thing. I have no idea if the mosquito bite went away or not, if it stopped itching, but this girl is now my wife. So I like to say that this remedio works wonders.
It worked.
It really, really worked. It's amazing. So now I preach it. If anybody ever has a mosquito bite, try the salt and see if you end up getting married or have something cool happening, because apparently it's a thing.
Let us know, listeners. Let us know. I love that. And what is your quote or mantra that you live by right now?
The mantra, I think, I go through seasons. I feel like every year I have a different one. One I used to have a couple years ago was I make money while I'm at the beach. And I thought that was so cool because it allowed me, or gave me the permission to basically slow down and have these little moments and days, right?
Yes.
But the one that I'm really leaning into, and I think I picked this one up last January or February, so it's been over a year now. And it goes, I create extraordinary things in record timing.
Ooh.
It makes me feel extraordinary, right? So I'm loving that one right now.
I am with you. I might adopt it, actually.
Go for it. Yes, please.
So cool. And what's your productivity tip, trick, or tool that you want to share with us?
Productivity. So this sounds counterintuitive, but I put a lot of pressure on myself to work. It's obviously this conditioning I've inherited through school, corporate, all the things. It's this need to do in order to survive and to succeed. And one of the things that I've been doing to almost like counteract that is I've been taking little breaks, and I call them my little Disney dance breaks. And my brain at first would not allow me to take a break, especially if I'm like really busy and I have like deadlines or whatever that might be, which are usually self-imposed because I'm an entrepreneur. But what I do now is I chug my lemon water throughout the day. So I have to go to the bathroom. So when I go to the bathroom, I blast some Disney tunes. I dance a little bit while I'm washing my hands, and I just get into this vibey energy. And all of a sudden I come back to work and I'm feeling more empowered, like more capable of doing whatever I want, of creating extraordinary things in record timing, right? So that's my little productivity tool. It makes me get a lot of stuff done.
I like that. I actually, I mean, I'm processing as you're talking, and it sounds very like restorative, which leads me to my next question, which is, how do you embrace restorative pauses?
Oh, I think it's like a learning curve, a learning experience, because I actually go through seasons. I go through seasons where I feel like I'm always prioritizing myself and I'm always focusing on my mental health and just healing and joy and living my life in the moment, essentially. And then I go through seasons, and they start off intentionally. Like, okay, I'm going to go through like a mini hustle season. I'm going to put in a lot of work because I have this exciting project. And usually the deeper I get into it, the more I lose sight of the fact that this is intentional. And I slip into hustle mode and start working longer hours and burning myself out. Maybe not fully, but like slowly entering burnout era. And usually those moments, I talk a lot with my partner at the end of the day. So I feel like that allows me to self-reflect back and be like, okay, we've slipped a little bit too far into this. And it really varies in the season of life, but it's that mental, at least that choice, that decision to be like, okay, this is not the lifestyle that I want, to be working 24/7. So let's try and get back to that, right? Like, let's start to find different ways, whether it's the Disney dance breaks, whether it's taking a nap, even though it takes so much willpower to take a nap in the middle of the day when you have other stuff to do, going on a little walk, especially now with a baby, it's a little bit easier because it's not for me, it's for somebody else that I'm trying to add these little moments of joy or different activities. But it's a learning experience. And I think I go through it every season, but it's that internal decision and then just finding small bite-sized ways of going back to what I need really as a human being.
I like that. I think what you said, it's a choice, and also giving yourself permission to have moments in life that are much more intense, and the awareness to say, okay, that happened. How could we slow it down a little bit?
Yeah. I think we shame ourselves a lot because we almost desire this thing. And if we don't have it all the time, whether it's the freedom, the balance, the whatever, it's like, oh, well, we're failing. We're doing it wrong. It's like, no, you get to regroup. Like, we go through different seasons in life, in business, and that's okay. It's that ability to always tap in with yourself, to check in and be like, okay, are we still going in the direction that I want to? Do I need to balance things off a little bit more? Are we maybe going a little bit harder on something that we prefer to not? And you just adjust as you go along, and it's totally fine. You're still quote unquote successful. You're still doing the things that you love. It's just going to look different in every season, and that's okay.
I agree. I think I used to say, every morning is a new chance, but I think every minute is a new chance.
Oh, I like that. We're going to get off this call and I'm going to see what I can do for myself before I continue for the rest of the day.
Yay! Well, thank you so much for coming to Café con Pam. This was fun. I think we have so much more to talk about, so maybe you'll come back another time. But thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely loved the cafecito break, by the way. That was amazing, even though it's so off-brand for me. That was like one of the coolest experiences on an interview. So thank you for having me. Thank you for like the fun experience. And I can't wait to chat later.
Yay! All right, listeners, that was my conversation with Steph. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you are inspired to go into your speaking journey, because we've had this month, we've had 2 speaking coaches, and I think more and more we are seeing the need for representation of people like us. So if you are someone who's been thinking about it, maybe you have a story to tell, maybe you get excited when people think, or when you think getting on stages and speaking, maybe speaking is on your journey, on your radar. Now, I think it's worth mentioning, you don't have to have this big dream of getting on like stadium-sized stages. You know, you can just be like, hey, I want to like go into affinity groups and create some impact. Or maybe you want to work with your local community and do small workshops. Whatever works for you, you get to define that. And I hope this episode with Steph inspired you to maybe even explore that. Iguana listeners, if this is your first time here, thank you for being here. Appreciate you so much. Hit the subscribe if you're on YouTube or in another podcast listening platform. You can also follow if you are on Apple Podcast or Spotify. You follow there. Hit whatever button on your device invites you to stay connected, because it really helps when you click those buttons. It allows the algorithm, kind of like gives the points to the algorithm, so the algorithm knows that people are listening to Café con Pam, that our stories are being shared, and therefore recommendations happen so more people can listen to us. So I appreciate you taking the time to hit the buttons, drop some stars, of course, leave a rating and a review on whatever platform you're on. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. Let us know what your thoughts are. And let's stay connected on socials at Café con Pam Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Check out our website, cafeconpam.com. That's where you can find the episode notes for this specific episode. This is where you can find all the things we are currently working on. Additional articles. We have pour-overs that they're really cool. It's so fun for me to read them and to work on those. I don't work on those as much as on the episode, but it's really fun to read what people's stories in a different format. And the story of the pour-overs came because we needed more forms of sharing people's stories. And so now we have 3 ways that we share stories. One through the podcast, which is this, pour-overs at cafeconpam.com, and YouTube exclusives also. So there's so many stories that we have shared that don't make it to the podcast, and it's really important for us to get you exposed to them so you get to listen to them, because they're super fun. And the reason why we don't add them to the podcast is because we only have so much space in the podcast. We podcast once a week, and so for additional content, this is why we invite you to stay connected so you can explore the other places where we can hang out. Y bueno, listeners, thank you so much for being here today. Como siempre, stay shining.